You're listening to the Telltale Channel. In this podcast, Ryan Walters, superintendent over Oklahoma schools, just announced that he's putting a Bible in every classroom and teachers will be required to teach from it. Of course, it's going to be shot down, but he had a hilarious and fascinating conversation with Alan Dershowitz. You know, Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer. Turns out Alan Dershowitz disagreed with Ryan Walters. Knock me over with a feather. Let's talk about it. Christian nationalist Joel Webbon went on Stu Peters' podcast, and they couldn't help but to repeat Nazi propaganda. That's a sentence I never thought I'd say. When it's convenient, these people are the biggest Christians on planet Earth. When it's inconvenient, like following Jesus' command to love your neighbor as yourself, it all goes right out the window. Janet Porter is a Christian nationalist. She's probably most famous for writing the abortion bounty law in Texas. Remember that? Texas passed a bill that said people could sue others who had an abortion or took part in the process anywhere along the way. If the jury decides they really did have an abortion, they win $10,000. She has a new idea for a lawsuit. She basically copy and pasted that bill, but this time, she targeted teachers, librarians, or school administration. If anybody even mentions anything that could be interpreted as related to being gay at all, they can be sued. The Supreme Court just erased regulatory power of the federal government with one judgment. The case is Chevron USA versus Natural Resources Defense Council. We're going to talk to a law student about the implications of the case. In a nutshell, the loss means the Supreme Court took power from the executive branch and gave it to themselves. It's absolutely crazy. I'm surprised it hasn't received more attention. If you want to leave a voicemail, the number is 1-800-701-8573. I had a problem with my voicemail system recently, but it's fixed. So give me a call, and if you leave a voicemail shorter than like a minute, I'm nearly guaranteed to listen. By the way, guys, just a quick note. If you want to listen to like the audio version of this, it comes with a total of 2 ads, one in the beginning and one in the middle, and they're 60 seconds each. And you can lock the app and put it in your pocket. It's on Apple Podcasts and CastBox and everywhere. Everywhere podcasts can be found. I set up a new app for it. It's Owen Morgan Fireside Chat is what it's called. And it apparently, like, despite only playing 2 ads, it pays like 10 times the amount that YouTube does. YouTube usually has like 6 or 7 ads per video. This has 2 ads. It pays $35 per 1,000 views versus YouTube's like $4 to $6 per 1,000. I don't know what the deal is, but it's really useful, actually. It's really helpful to me. So if you guys want to listen to the audio version, it releases on Spreaker and Apple Podcasts and everywhere. So anyway, if you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, don't forget to check out my Patreon. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I'm selling my book, Understanding Jehovah's Witnesses, 400 pages, and my second book, 100 Questions for Jehovah's Witnesses, which is about 80 pages. And you can find them both there on the website. Audio form, ebook form, whatever. It's about my experiences within the religion and the history of the religion generally. The Supreme Court just made a decision on a case that I'm calling Chevron. It's Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council, and it's really influential. It's a really important decision. I can't believe it's not receiving more attention. So I want to talk about this with my wife, which I'm going to bring her in a second, but before we talk about it, I just want to lay this down for you, okay? Sometimes things feel bleak. So this situation seems pretty bleak that the Supreme Court made this choice, which we'll talk about in a second. But I'm going to say this at the beginning of every single episode that I do, every single clip for tonight. It feels like we're moving backward, but we will always move forward. We will always make progress as the human race or as a country. We will always move forward. We take 3 steps back, we take 4 steps forward every time. That's how it's always worked. Look at where we are compared to where we were in 1950. 1960, 70, 80, 90, 2000. We make large leaps forward, and conservatives, people who want to conserve the old traditional values, fight against it, and they get a couple of wins, and those wins evaporate eventually. So what we're about to talk about with Chevron is disappointing, and it's one of those steps back, but don't let it eat you up. With that being said, let me bring in my wife here. This is my wife. You can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Rose. I am Owen's wife, and I am a third-year law student.
Tell me about the Chevron case. Like, give me a basic rundown, and then we'll dive deeper into it. What is it?
So to even begin to get into the Chevron case, first we need to talk about the different branches of government. You have the legislative branch, you have the judicial branch, and you have the executive branch. Each one of those branches has been given different powers by the Constitution. So the legislative branch is the one who passes laws. And then the judicial branch is the one who interprets those laws, who decides exactly how it fits into the Constitution, into the other laws that have already been passed. And then the executive branch, they're the ones who are tasked with enforcing the laws. And what does enforcing mean? One of the first things that we did when I entered law school was talk about a hypothetical law that says you can't drive cars through a park. And that seems pretty straightforward on its face. Just don't drive a car through the park. But then you get into, what does a car mean? Do you define it based on the number of wheels? So 4 wheels versus 2 wheels. If you define the car based on 4 wheels, somebody could potentially drive a motorcycle in through. But then what if you say, oh, well, of course, it's just anything that is powered by an engine and has wheels. What about an electric bike? Those are generally accepted within parks. Or what if something has 8 wheels? For example, do you want people who rollerblade or roller skate through the park? Or what about strollers? Do you want people to bring strollers? And then you get into an issue of, what about an ambulance? Does an ambulance count as a car for this? So what you start off with seems like a very straightforward law, and you end up with ambiguity simply by trying to understand the meaning of one word, a car. And that is what's at the heart of Chevron, is how do you fix that ambiguity that exists within laws? Because all laws have ambiguity to some extent. And in Chevron, which was a case from the 1980s, they said, well, obviously that lies with the executive branch, the ones who have to enforce the laws, the ones who have to understand the meaning of the laws so that they can be enforced, so that fines can be brought against people who violate them and things along those lines. And since then, we've had dozens, hundreds of cases saying we need to give deference to the executive branch. That contains your public agencies, the OSHA, the EPA, the FDA, FCC, all of the acronyms. They take the laws and they make regulations, they make rules about how to understand these laws. And depending on the administration, depending on who's running these agencies, you can end up with very different rules. For example, within Title IX, Title IX is a law that basically says you can't discriminate against people in schools. But then you get into the nitty-gritty. What exactly counts as a school? Because under the Trump administration, religious schools received an exemption from Title IX. Whether they should or shouldn't is up to those agencies making the rules and the regulations. And now, since the Supreme Court has come out and said Chevron no longer exists, that means that the agencies don't have the power to define what a car is, and instead the courts do.
Okay, so in practice, that basically means it sounds like, are we in a place where the federal agencies or regulatory agencies like OSHA and the FCC, are they like useless now? What is their role even going to be? Any ideas?
So I don't want to sound bleak. I don't want to bring negativity, but that is a very good question. Under Chevron, the only way that courts would overrule an agency's decision would be to say it is completely unreasonable. So in the car example, it would be trying to say that a dog is a car. And that is obviously unreasonable, and therefore you can't have that as a rule. It's overruled. But then now you have the courts coming in and saying, well, we're the ones who define what a car is. So what role these agencies will have in that is a very, very good question. It basically means that the judicial branch has taken over the powers that have been vested in the executive branch, and explicitly given to the executive branch for the past 40 years.
Interesting. So sounds like the judicial branch has found a way to sidestep the executive branch. I was talking to you the other day about this, but isn't there something with like the abortion pills? Like, what's the deal with how that's going to be handled now?
So the FDA, one of the ways that the Biden administration has been fighting back against the abortion bans is through the FDA by saying that the drugs such as mifepristone and misoprostol, I hope I'm saying this right, it's classifying them in a certain way, saying they can be sent through the mail. And now the courts are saying that they actually have the power to decide that. And given that the Supreme Court is the one that overruled Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that is potentially very, very dangerous for everyone, even if they are in a blue state or a state that hasn't passed any strict abortion bans.
A while back when this debate was going on, I remember one judge deciding that it couldn't, that the male couldn't handle this medicine, the abortion pill, and another judge saying that it could. In that case, I guess it would just default to federal judges and ultimately the Supreme Court, right?
Yes. So those cases, they were challenging the FDA, they were challenging the federal government. And in this case, it would eventually be up to the Supreme Court to determine that. And there's no longer deference given to the agencies.
So can the agencies make decisions and then the courts can just override it if they want? Is that what it is?
That is pretty much exactly it. And even the extent to which the agencies can make the rules now is up in the air, because how can you make rules when the judicial branch can come in and say, well, no? How can you create predictability? How can you pass regulations? And how can you enforce them when the courts can step in at any point and say, this is not actually how it goes?
Yeah, I have to imagine that there are like millions of regulations, right? I mean, in all these different agencies, they've all passed who knows how many regulations over the years. In fact, there's like a subset of law devoted to regulations, right? Regulatory law or whatever. And
administrative law.
Right, that's it. And and now all of that stuff, everything can be challenged and go all the way through the court system and reversed, I guess.
Yeah, and it's the regulations, that's really what affects your life. It's not necessarily the laws. So the regulations are the ones that say your boss can't store uranium in the break room, or it says that you can't pollute the air, you can't pollute the drinking water. The regulations are what protects your medications. They are what protects wildlife. Everything in your life, your day-to-day life, is affected by regulations, not necessarily the law. And now the agencies that have an expertise, that are filled with PhDs, people who have devoted their careers to understanding very niche areas, have basically been told, you don't matter. It's these unelected, appointed judges who matter, who are not answerable to the general public.
Absolutely wild. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on with this? Any other piece of information that might be valuable to understand this situation?
I want people to remember that regulations, they're not just boring pieces of admin law. They're not just, they're essential parts to how the government functions. And every single one of them has been paid for in blood. And I'm not saying that as a hyperbole. So I want people to understand exactly how horrific it is that the courts have essentially taken the power away from the executive branch, have taken the power away from these regulations, that people died when they weren't in practice, when they didn't exist, and has now said, we control it. It is, in my opinion, obviously a non-expert, just a law student opinion, a judicial coup. And this is why it's so important to vote. And I understand that we have two candidates who who really aren't anyone's favorites. But this is the difference between voting and not voting. What we're seeing right now is the result of the 2016 election, nearly 10 years ago at this point. And it will get worse if we don't vote in November. If it's this bad now, imagine what happens if Trump gets another shot at it, if he can get more judges onto the bench. It will be a disaster. Project 2025 isn't even the worst that could come. So I want people to understand this is what happens when you don't vote, and this is why we need to vote, no matter how unpopular Biden is or how much I might disagree with a lot of his stances. What I agree with is having a functioning government.
Yeah, it seems to me that the far right will crawl over broken glass to vote for their guy, and we need to be as fervent. The health of a democracy can be determined by its voter base, the percent of people voting. So in Germany, in the 1920s, before World War II, it had like 80% turnout, which is crazy high because the democracy was failing. That's what happens when democracies start to fail. If it's going well, nobody cares. The only people that vote are like the extremists, and you get absolute nutcases in. We have to vote in good times and in bad times. And again, I want to make sure everybody understands, like, this is a bad decision, but we will take steps forward again. We will.
I agree we will, but we need to turn up and we need to fight for it. It's not going to happen on its own. And I don't want to sound negative, but this case is a complete dismantling of the government as we currently know it. And it will get worse if we don't show up. So we need to show up.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else you wanted to mention?
Well, there's a lot I could mention, but I think that I've hit the main points.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming on and giving us that information, and I'm sure we'll see you again on the channel. Next up, Ryan Walters, superintendent over Oklahoma schools, just announced that he's putting a Bible in every classroom, and teachers will be required to teach from it. Of course, it's going to be shot down, but he had a hilarious and fascinating conversation with Alan Dershowitz. You know, Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer. Turns out Alan Dershowitz disagreed with Ryan Walters. Knock me over with a feather. Let's talk about it. We'll be right back. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I'm selling my book, Understanding Jehovah's Witnesses, 400 pages, and my second book, 100 Questions for Jehovah's Witnesses, which is about 80 pages. And you can find them both there on the website. Audio form, ebook form, whatever. It's about my experiences within the religion and the history of the religion generally. On the left is a guy named Ryan Walters. On the right is Alan Dershowitz. He was Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer. Yes, seriously, Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer. I know, what kind of a scumbag would take that job? This kind of scumbag. Anyway, Ryan Walters is about to argue with Alan Dershowitz that it's a good thing to have Bibles in classrooms that you use to teach children with. So I want to listen to this argument with Chris Cuomo in the middle. I thought Chris Cuomo was like, okay, but he's turning out to be a scumbag in his own right. We'll get there. First, I want to listen to Ryan Walters' announcement that he's going to put Bibles in every classroom. Before we listen, though, I just want to say sometimes things look bleak. I don't want you to get down about this, okay? It feels like we're taking like 10 steps back, and maybe we are, but we always take more steps forward than we do backward. Always. Look at where we are compared to where we were in the 50s or the 60s when we were drinking from blacks and whites only water fountains. It's not the same. We are in a better place today than we were back then. People are desperate to bring us back to where we were previously, but the moral arc of the universe bends toward justice because we're bending it that way. So don't get too down about this. But let's listen to what Ryan Walters had to say. He's the superintendent of Oklahoma schools, over all Oklahoma schools. Check this announcement out. This, by the way, was released June 27th, 2024.
We're going to make an important announcement today regarding the Bible and the Ten Commandments. My staff has been looking at Oklahoma statute. We've been looking at Oklahoma academic standards. And it's crystal clear to us that in the Oklahoma Academic Standards, under Title 70, multiple occasions, the Bible is a necessary historical document to teach our
I'm sorry?
Historical document to teach our kids about the history of this country, to have a complete understanding of Western civilization.
He must know where Oklahoma ranks, right? In, like, education. He must recognize that Oklahoma is number 49, doesn't he? Who's the lowest? It's like Alabama, isn't it? I think it's Alabama is number 50. You are so bad. The only state that is winning at being terrible is Alabama, okay? You need to do something to fix this. And guess what? Putting the Bible in schools is going to make it worse. He must know that. He must, right? Dude is like, is he like an accelerationist? Like he's setting out to make this worse?
To have a complete understanding of Western civilization, to have an understanding of the basis of our legal system, and as frank...
Wait, to have an understanding of our legal system? He's going to read the Bible for that?
And as frankly, when we're talking about the Bible, one of the most foundational documents used for the Constitution and the birth of our country.
No, that's incorrect. It's a flat-out falsehood. It's a lie that was fabricated by David Barton. We're going to get there in a second. Just listen to the rest of his ridiculous video here.
We also find major points in history that refer to the Bible, that reference the Bible. We see multiple figures, whether we're talking about the Federalist Papers, constitutional conventional arguments, and Martin Luther King Jr., who use it as a tremendous impetus for the civil rights movement, and tie many of those arguments back to the Bible.
No, that's just like a flat-out lie, okay? Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson and, Benjamin Franklin and a whole bunch of other founding fathers were deists at best and atheists in some cases. The only Christian founding father that you can really name that was like influential to any degree was John Adams. And that dude was absolutely terrible. Holy Christ on a cracker, bro. That guy was bad. And he sent some real weird like letters to his wife, Abigail. Oh my God, dude. I mean, the point is that this is a fictitious history that never happened. The Bible was not the basis for our laws or our Constitution or anything. And you know, one simple way you can deduce that just without knowing any history at all, look at the Constitution itself. The First Amendment contradicts the First Commandment. He didn't even think about that, I guess, did he? You shall have no other gods before me versus you can worship any way you want. You can worship any god that you want. Freedom of religion. That's not what the First Commandment had to say at all. But I guess, like, none of that matters to him.
It is essential that our kids have an understanding of the Bible and its historical context.
Well, they can get that at church, not at school.
So we will be issuing a memo today that every school district will adhere to, which is that every teacher, every classroom in the state will have a Bible in the classroom and will be teaching from the Bible in the classroom to ensure that this historical understanding is there for every student in the state of Oklahoma.
Look, if he wants to draw a link to historical understanding in the Bible, then he can do that if it's actually factual. Like Martin Luther King Jr. really did quote from the Bible because he was a pastor. And if you want to like include those quotes or whatever in your lessons about Martin Luther King Jr., go nuts. Nobody's trying to stop you from doing that. That's not what he wants to do. Okay, this guy wants to preach the Bible in public schools. This is a step past just putting 10 commandments in classrooms. This is full-on indoctrination. Public schools are not Sunday schools.
In accordance with our academic standards and state law.
In accordance with our academic standards, he says. Well, I guess this is a good way to get you out of 49th, isn't it? And down to 50th, if that's even possible. Anyway, like I said, David Barton was kind of the source of a lot of this nonsensical garbage, this pseudo historical BS. He claims to be a constitutional historian or something, this guy on screen here. He's not at all. Never was. He has a 4-year degree from some Christian college, I think. And by the way, Christian colleges they're terrible. Are they even accredited? Most aren't. But I think that there's one board that accredits all of the Christian schools and ITT Tech and a bunch of other for-profit colleges that are like ripoffs and scams. You know why they can't get accreditation anywhere else? Because they're terrible. That's why. Nobody else trusts them to deliver a good education. And that's where he got his education. A 4-year degree from, where was it? Oral Roberts University. Yep, that's where he went. Oral Roberts University. Is basically like a seminary. And now he wanders around the country telling people about the founding fathers. And he's just like making things up. Anyway, listen to what he had to say here. This clip is from early May 2024.
If you look at the annual report for the public schools of New Jersey in 1816, this is what they put out as the annual report. They're talking about the first and second grades. They call them the first and second classes.
No, they don't actually. This thing that he's about to refer to is talking about first and second classes at a Sunday school.
It says, all the scholars of the first and second classes commit to memory portions of the New Testament or Psalms, a lesson of the Catechism, several hymns, and the text of the preceding Sabbath. So every kid in first and second grade memorizes.
First and second classes, okay? They didn't call grades classes back then. He's just making up right now, right?
That. No, by the way, what is the text of the preceding Sabbath? It's simple. Whatever Pastor Mike talked about last week, you memorize all the verses he mentioned in the sermon. By the way, that's probably not a bad idea to do. Figure out whatever verses he mentioned in the sermon, and through the week, try to memorize every verse that he talked about.
You want to do that for your church or whatever? Go nuts. I can't stop you, and I don't want to stop you. Go crazy. But this was not instituted in public schools originally, has never been instituted in public schools, and he's just making this up.
That's what public schools were doing in New Jersey in 1816.
No, it isn't. And I have proof, believe it or not. This is a Right Wing Watch's article on this video. David Barton's history simply cannot be trusted. This is from September 21st, 2022. Thanks to the quotations Barton cited, we were able to track down the document he used in making this claim. It was a report from the Board of Directors of the Free School Association of Elizabethtown, published in a periodical called the Christian Herald, and predictably, Barton was blatantly misrepresenting it. And this is the actual original document. I'm going to zoom in and scroll from top to bottom if anybody wants to, like, pause the video and read the whole thing, okay? There you go. This is the whole thing. Feel free to read it on your own time if you'd like. Now let's talk about what it was saying. The first thing one notices upon reading the report is that the reference to the scholars of the first and second classes, quote unquote, as Barton said, does not refer to what today would be called first and second graders. The report explicitly states students are divided into 7 classes based upon their reading and writing abilities, and that most of the children in the 5th class were unable to read when they entered school. For the record, compulsory elementary school, elementary school was not like standardized, and kids were not all going to elementary school until like 1852 or something like that. This is from 1816. I mean, there were elementary schools, I think, but they weren't like public, institutionalized, like big things like we have today, like Barton is portraying it. It's unlikely that first and second graders were memorizing entire books of the Bible, as Barton claimed, while 5th graders were unable to read. Here's another video from Barton. The reason I'm talking about him is because Ryan Walters is like convinced by this propaganda, convinced by these lies. This one is from late April 2023.
Get everything this man has ever written, every sermon he's ever preached,
every lie he's ever told.
Observe it, follow it. You will be stronger for it. Any final words you want to share? Because I just want everyone to know how much I appreciate, adore, and thank God for you.
for your lies.
Yeah, final words is I'm going to tell everybody you need to read the Bible more often than you do. I don't care how often you read it. It's not often enough. Number two, you need to memorize it a whole lot more than you do. We show people right now that in 1816 in New Jersey public schools, every public school kid by the second grade had memorized the Gospel of John in public.
That's just a lie. He's just lying. He's just like making shit up right now.
Gospel of John in public schools.
So another example of just a blatant, flat-out lie that this guy tells is about the Black Robe Regiment. David Barton claims that there's this group, this organization or whatever called the Black Robe Regiment, where in the early days of the country, like during the Revolutionary War, pastors would teach their message or whatever, and at the end of the sermon, they would pull their robes off and they'd be wearing full military greaves, and they would take their church out to a shooting range and train them on how to clean their weapons and how to shoot and the whole nine, you know, how to march in sync and all of it. Like a military, they were a military regiment. The Black Robe Regiment is what it was called. It's fake. He made that up, like completely out of thin air. Okay? That word didn't even exist. The Black Robe Regiment was made up by David Barton. The first appearance of that term on Google Books, like you can, you know, search for words and their usages over time because Google Books has a whole bunch of books archived. The first time that word is ever used was in David Barton's book, I think in 1995, maybe? Like, this guy just makes things up like mad. This is a screenshot from Right Wing Watch's Twitter account. They do a whole bunch of research on this subject. Barton's article on the original Black Robe Regiment appears to be typical of his approach. It proffers an impressive number of footnotes, 101 in all. In closer examination, however, those citations don't add up to so much. Footnote 66, for example, is simply a repetition of footnote 1 when Barton returns to the phrase Black Regiment. Black Regiment was an actual thing, though. That was a regiment of Black Americans from Massachusetts who fought in a war, World War II maybe? I don't remember which war. Nothing to do with pastors, nothing to do with, you know, regiments that plug into a larger army to fight the revolutionary, blah, blah, blah. None of that. God, dude. It's just insane. He's lying, right? Am I safe in saying that? He's just like flat out lying right now. So footnote 1 returns to the phrase Black Regiment, but that set of sources doesn't actually offer evidence for the essay's first sentence. The Black Robed Regiment was the name that the British placed on the courageous and patriotic American clergy during the founding era, a backhanded reference to the black robes they wore. And then he puts a footnote in. In fact, Google Books can't find the phrase Black Robed Regiment from any source prior to this century. It appears that Barton made it up inadvertently or on purpose, based on the actual period phrase Black Regiment. It's just like he made it up, is the point here. It's just made up. David Barton spreading this Black Robe Regiment idea, this meme or whatever, has led to people actually creating a Black Robed Regiment. Like pastors getting together and forming out a militia that does exactly what Barton envisioned. This is one of the 231 pastors who signed up to be a Black Robe Regiment preacher or whatever. This is from May 4th, 2024. And by the way, I watched this whole video, the whole thing, on my Owen Morgan Unfiltered YouTube channel if you want to give it a listen. Just search for Black Robe Regiment.
When 231 of us signed on January the 1st of this year at 0400 hours, 231 of us in and out of uniform.
In and out of uniform. In and out of uniform. They're wearing fatigues. Is that what they're called? Yeah, he's saying that they were wearing like military fatigues, like the outfit, the uniform that they wear when they signed up for the Black Robe Regiment, these pastors. For context, a company in the Army is about 60 to 200 soldiers or 3 platoons. And a platoon is between 20 and 80 soldiers, I suppose. A battalion is 300 to 1,200 soldiers, or made up of 4 to 7 companies. And a regiment is about 800 men. So I think in this order, it's company, battalion, regiment. I'm not a military person, so someone can correct me in the comments if that's incorrect. But the point is that they're forming out full-blown military-style, like, organization, top-down organization. And the pastor is supposed to be like the commanding officer, like the brigadier general or whatever. Full-blown terrorist organizations.
Uniform signed a declaration of military accountability to hold
military accountability. These guys signed
accountability to hold those leaders at the top who are corrupt accountable.
And he decides who those corrupt people at the top are, of course, right? That sounds like treason, right? Or not? Is it treason, or I get maybe sedition? It could be sedition. Is this not sedition? How is it that every one of the 231 people who signed this pledge are not in federal prison right now?
Because accountability does not equate to overthrowing a government. That's what they want to say. They want to turn around and call it sedition.
That's what it seemed like to me. Tell me the difference. What's the difference exactly between what you're doing and sedition?
It's not that. It's accountability. Because when a 2-star general came to me on the border and said...
yeah, he goes off on this stupid thing about being anti-vax. Anyway, again, you want to watch it, Owen Morgan Unfiltered, you just search for it there. The point is, they're framing it as accountability instead of sedition. Okay, I'm going to have to look that up later, see what the difference is between the two. Certainly, in his mind, there is no difference, actually, like practically. So yeah, David Barton has been the source of so many lies, it's ridiculous. And the lies that he tells lead to real-world consequences, like Ryan Walters forcing teachers to teach from the Bible in Oklahoma schools. You know, this is almost certainly going to be shot down in the courts. Nearly guaranteed. But he has to be successful once. We have to be successful all the time. He can throw as many curveballs, as many bills or regulations or rules or whatever, or memos as he wants at the wall. And one of them is probably going to stick. That's what he's waiting for. He's waiting for one to stick. Anyway, he goes on Chris Cuomo to debate Alan Dershowitz. So Chris Cuomo used to be a Democratic news anchor or whatever on CNN, I think. Sadly, he's gone completely off the deep end. He's like this anti-vax, anti-COVID nutcase at this point. It's really bad. Just the fact that he brought these two guys on to debate each other, quote unquote, is bad enough. Why is Alan Dershowitz even in the public eye anymore? Dude defended Jeffrey Epstein, and I believe that there's tangible proof that he was involved in Jeffrey Epstein's dirty dealings with children, you know, seriously. I don't know why this guy isn't in jail next to Harvey Weinstein. And I don't know why people are still bringing him on their shows. Anyway, Dershowitz got famous for representing O.J. Simpson originally. So they're about to debate, Ryan Walters and Alan Dershowitz, about whether this is a good idea. Dershowitz, everybody on screen here is like right-wing, and Walters and Dershowitz are right-wing extremists, nutcases. But Dershowitz is Jewish. So let's listen to the debate here.
Let's bring in Ryan Walters, the superintendent, to make his case. And we also have Harvard Law professor and constitutional scholar Alan Dershowitz, who understands the lines. First of all, sir, thank you for taking the opportunity. I appreciate you doing so. Why is this okay, meaning it is not to indoctrinate people to Christianity, but you believe it is part of a balanced curriculum?
I find it so fascinating that Walters is like obsessed with complaining till he's blue in the face about the trans agenda or the gay agenda or whatever, indoctrinating children in schools, and that's not happening. But he's literally doing what he's accusing others of doing. He's setting up an indoctrination machine in public schools. So he doesn't have a problem with indoctrination. I do. I don't want that. He just wants people to be indoctrinated in his belief system, is all. Did CNN fire him? That's probably why he lost his mind. Yeah, I think they did, because he protected his brother, Andrew Cuomo, when there were like allegations against him. Andrew Cuomo was like the governor of New York State for a while. But I don't know. if there were other underlying reasons to why they fired him. But yeah, he's terrible now, sadly. One day I'm going to do a whole breakdown on Andrew Cuomo, or Chris Cuomo, but not today.
Yes, sir. You know, the process for us started over a year ago where we looked at academic standards and we asked the public and several task force what's missing here. And they said, well, listen, you know, when we're talking about American history and you don't have direct references towards where did Thomas Jefferson come up with endowed by our creator? What was he referencing there?
Okay, that's fascinating. I'm sorry. I don't want to stop every 15 seconds. Like, I want to let them get this out, but I just want to address this real quick. Thomas Jefferson was a deist. He's as close to an atheist as you got back then. There's the Jefferson Bible. He took a little razor knife and cut out all of the nonsense, all the magical stuff from the Bible, and he's left with something that's like paper thin. And it was just like moral statements, basically. And honestly, those moral statements were terrible, like awful. Anyway, Thomas Jefferson was very opposed to church and state melding, like very opposed. And he talked about it in his letters to Danbury Baptist Church. It was a Calvinist church that controlled Connecticut. It was like the state church of Connecticut or whatever. And Danbury Baptist Church didn't like it. They wrote letters to Jefferson and said, I thought that this is exactly why, you know, you put this into the Constitution, to prevent this type of thing. And Jefferson wrote back, yes, that is exactly why that's in the Constitution. There should not be a state church, and we will find a way to overturn that. And they did. Within 10 years or something, Thomas Jefferson became president, and they finally got that overturned and abolished this Calvinist denomination as a state church. Anyway, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence exactly? For some reason, I didn't think it was Thomas Jefferson. Of course, there were a bunch of people that signed it, but who actually wrote the thing? Livingston and Roger Sherman dictated it, and the actual writing was done by Jefferson, I guess. About the we're endowed by our forefathers, created equal, blah, 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 all that stuff, like he said here.
We're talking about American history, and you don't have direct references towards where did Thomas Jefferson come up with endowed by our creator? What was he?
Yeah, endowed by our creator. Specifically, the reason that he said that wasn't to make a point about us being like a religious country or religious people. He did not want to make that point, explicitly didn't want to make that point. The reason he put that in is because he wanted to communicate that our rights come from something other than government. Our rights are inherent, given to us from birth. Government doesn't have a right to take them away. So it's flipping it around. Our rights aren't granted by government. They exist with or without government. That's the point there. And also, that was the Declaration of Independence, not the Constitution. That was Thomas Jefferson giving the middle finger to King George or whatever. And it was like 10 years before the Constitution was even written, I think. Right?
Referencing there when you talk about Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail, and he's talking about Bible stories, and yet, you know, you're not saying anything about their belief system.
I mention it if you want. I learned that Martin Luther King Jr. was Christian when I was in school. Okay, fine. That doesn't justify, like, reading from the Bible on a daily basis. Like, what?
He's talking about Bible stories, and yet, you know, you're not saying anything about their belief system, Mayflower Compact, etc. We knew that we needed to include the Bible directly into the classroom so that
he knew that
kids understood the full historical context of its role in American history. And that has been the document that was
There is no role in American history the way that he's laying out. Like I said, founding fathers were largely non-theistic or deistic at best. Like they thought maybe there was a God that created everything, sparked it into being, but he didn't have an active role in everyday life, and it maybe not even the Christian God. Like, who knows? Religion was not a big part of any of their lives. In fact, the United States is the first and biggest example of a secular nation in human history. There are others that have tried it, but they were really small. On this scale, this is the experiment. This is the American experiment. Can a secular government work? And the answer is yes, until people like Ryan Walters come along to tear it down.
History, and that has been the document that was under attack by the left. It had been removed from classrooms, and we're saying, listen, we're proud to be the first state to bring it back in a historical context so our kids can have a full understanding of American history.
And that's going to get you from 49th place to first in education? Okay.
Why not also include the Torah, where so much of the ethics and morality in the Bible come from, if you want to teach the proper context?
Okay. Loaded question and ridiculous, and it betrays the bias that Chris Cuomo has. The Torah is included in the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. That's the Torah. You know what? I got it confused. I apologize. The Pentateuch might be the first 5 books of the Bible. Torah is the Hebrew on a scroll, so it's not actually Bible or Old Testament. Okay, my mistake.
Great question. So we do include all of the other religious texts as well.
The Quran? Do you include the book of Zohar, the one that Jews derive Kabbalah from? Or is it just like the Bible specifically? Do you include the Bhagavad Gita? Do you include like any of the Zoroastrian or Hindu or Buddhist or Shinto texts, or hell, why don't we go even deeper? Do you include the Aboriginals' holy texts? Do you include like the Mayan or Inca or Aztec texts about religion or whatever? I mean, I don't even know if they have texts about religion, but do you include those if they do exist? Of course he doesn't. He includes the Bible, the Christian Bible. That's it. Now, Christianity, having derived from Judaism, has like a few books from the original Jewish holy texts. That is as far as it goes. And he knows that.
Great question. So we do include all of the other religious texts as well. But Chris, the thing that has come under attack is the Bible. The Bible is the document that the teachers' unions and left-wing activists have had removed from the classroom. We've had multiple threats of lawsuits here in Oklahoma.
Lawsuits? Oh, my God. Can you imagine lawsuits? Like, that's how our legal system works, you jag off. All right, I'm not going to be that guy. Not going to be that guy.
From the classroom, we've had multiple threats of lawsuits here in Oklahoma. So they had taken them off the shelves. We're telling them, guys, the Bible has proven to have secular value in its historical context in America.
No, the Bible's proven to have secular value. Like, does that sentence even make sense?
Value in its historical context in American history, it has to be included. We're not seeing the left come after these other documents. We allow a lot of other documents in the classroom. It's not exclusive to the Bible, but the Bible's the one that has been under attack and has been removed.
Well, hold on now. Nobody said you're not allowed to have a Bible in the classroom. Nobody banned Bibles from being in a classroom. A teacher can have a Bible in their bag or whatever if they want and read it at lunch. Nobody cares. No one's trying to stop them from doing that. But when they're on the clock as a government-sanctioned teacher, when they're on the clock as somebody who is representing the government and it's compulsory, children must sit there and listen, you have no right to indoctrinate anybody with anything. Anything. I mean anything at all. You should be teaching them how to read and write and learn math and science and all that stuff.
Under attack and has been removed, and we feel it's essential to get it back in the classroom.
Professor, what is the bar, and do you think this will get over it in terms of being a constitutional implementation?
Again, like, this guy's a total scumbag. Don't know why they brought him on. They're both scumbag. All three of them are scumbags, honestly. But this guy is, like, as far as I can tell, like, he's a I think, in my opinion. Take that as you will. It's worth what you paid for it, that opinion, but seems like it to me.
And do you think this will get over it in terms of being a constitutional implementation?
It shouldn't. According to the Constitution, it shouldn't.
Well, I hope not, but I can't be sure with the current Supreme Court. Let's remember that if you go back to the history and you quote Thomas Jefferson, you have to quote him in full. Thomas Jefferson was virulently anti-Catholic. He and Adams agreed upon very little, but they agreed that no country that allowed Catholics into the country or Jesuits into the country could ever be a free country. This country was not founded on Christianity. It was founded on Protestantism.
It's an interesting point. Again, I didn't actually expect to hear myself agreeing with a like this, but here we sit. Crazy, huh?
Anti-Catholicism. In some jurisdictions, people couldn't vote unless they were Protestant. So let's tell the truth about the history. The history was not the history of Christianity or even Judeo-Christianity. It included virulent anti-Catholic bigotry. Are we going to teach that? Are we going to teach the parts of the Bible that justify slavery, that justify treating women as second-class citizens? Or are we going to be selective in what we pick? Or which Bible will we use? The Douay version, which is the official Catholic version, which has been banned by parts of the United States? Will it be the King James version? Will it be the Jewish Publication Society version? Will it include the Quran? Will it include other religious texts and religious books?
Dude, this guy has some really good points. I can appreciate that.
Will it include atheist tracts, arguments against the existence of God? Are we going to let this?
Yeah, legally, atheism is recognized as a religion for legal purposes, like protection under the law, and like prisoners, if they have a religious belief, like they believe that they shouldn't be subject to this or that, or they shouldn't be forced to go to church or whatever, for legal reasons, atheism is classified as a religion. So,
sense of God, are we going to let the students really make decisions? Are we really going to further divide the country along religious lines? We're so divided today. Do we want even greater division? I hope the Supreme Court agrees with that and strikes down any statute or any rule that requires the Bible or the Ten Commandments. Look,
I can see Ryan Walters getting like miffed in the corner here. He's like wringing his hands and he's shaking his head like he's gonna give it to this good. Probably expected to like agree with him on most things, but that took him by surprise, I guess. Took me by surprise, honestly.
The Bible or the Ten Commandments. Look, I love the Bible. I love most of the Ten Commandments, not all of them, but I love most of the Ten Commandments. Remember that the first four are all religious. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain. God damn it.
I love that, dude. I'm going to start using that. That's great. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain, God damn it. Oh, that's just the best. He's really funny.
No, why should we be teaching our students about not taking the name of the Lord in vain?
Dude, look at Ryan Walters' face when he does that. When this conversation goes through. Listen to this one more time.
Shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain. God damn it. Don't. No, why should we be teaching our students about not taking the name of the Lord in vain?
He's just shaking his head.
Or I am the God who took you out of Egypt. Yeah, don't kill. Even that's a debate, because the word in Hebrew is lo tirtzach, do not murder. But one version of the Bible says do not kill. Another version says do not murder. We're going to just have fight after fight after fight
I get it.
this.
I get the argument, but let's give the superintendent the last word here. Superintendent, respond, please.
Yeah, everybody on this thing is so completely full of shit. And I can't even believe that I'm sitting here agreeing with Alan Dershowitz.
Absolutely. That's the most absurd argument I've ever heard. You're going to go back and say that we can't talk about references to biblical text.
No, you can. Yeah, absolutely. You have a valid reason to reference the Bible, like you need to reference what Martin Luther King Jr. taught or whatever. Fine, go nuts. That's not what he's trying to do. He's trying to force teachers to teach from the Bible.
American history. We can't explain to students why Martin Luther King Jr. referenced the Ten Commandments and the
Go nuts!
Civil Rights Movement and talked about biblical examples in his letter from a Birmingham jail because he's wanting to take this into a theological argument. It's not a theological argument, Professor. This is an argument about history and people in our history who have referenced the Bible and them in their own words.
Well, you can reference that all you want, but alternative history, quote unquote, or pseudo history doesn't belong in a classroom.
Claimed it motivated them. Absolutely, our students should understand that. Absolutely, our students should understand the historical context of the founding of our country. And so you're wanting to censor American history by not including the faith of the people in our past. That's absurd. Our students have the intelligence to understand why people made decisions in this country, and it played a crucial role in American history. I know you're trying to...
Yeah, I know that. So Alan Dershowitz, it sounds like he's trying to say, then teach him about the anti-Catholic bias. Spread that anti-Catholic bias, because that's what it's about. If you frame this a little bit differently, if you frame it the way that Ryan Walters is viewing it right now, he doesn't want to teach about Catholic bigotry in, the early days of the country. He wants to teach Catholic bigotry from the early days. He doesn't want to teach about the Bible. That'd be fine, whatever. He wants to teach the Bible. And honestly, teaching about the Bible is irrelevant. Why? If you want to talk about the Bible, then give the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita and everything else equal time, in my opinion. Don't give them any time. Give them all zero. They're here to learn, about like buoyancy and density and moles and chemistry and atoms and blah, 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 all that stuff. Not about Jesus and why.
Country,
Tell them about
and it played a crucial role in American history. I know you're trying to talk over me here, but it's really clear.
Like colossal scumbag.
Our history, the founders were clear. People throughout our history were clear that Christianity played a role in their decision making. Our kids need to understand that very clearly.
Yeah.
Quickly, because I got to go,
Christianity.
Yeah, I think that's about the end. Almost. Yeah. Let's see what Dershowitz says to close up.
Quickly, because I got to go,
Christianity. The founding fathers, Catholic.
Understood. Superintendent, thank you. This is going to continue. It's going to be...
Unfortunately.
It's going to be litigated in all likelihood. You are welcome here for the duration, Ryan Walters, to make the case as we go through, okay? You'll get a fair shot. And, Professor, thank you for the counter, as always. Thank you for the benefit to the audience.
These people are terrible. Seriously. Everybody on screen. And I'm so disappointed in Chris Cuomo. Anyway, the point is, Ryan Walters is setting out to force teachers to teach about the Bible, including Muslim teachers, I guess. What is wrong with him? The biggest, in my opinion, seems like the biggest scumbag on planet Earth. How would Mike Lindell say it?
Now you're an asshole. You got that? You're an asshole, is what you are. No, he's an asshole. He's an ambulance chasing asshole. That's what you are. The lumpy pillows, kiss my ass. Put that in your book.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that so much. Are they allowed to talk about the Quran when discussing Malcolm X? Oh, no. That would be destruction of the wall between church and state. Of course not. They're so completely full of... I mean, Ryan Walters is. And honestly, Chris Cuomo and everybody else in this little realm. It's paper-thin logic when put under a microscope or even examined, just flatly falls apart into a billion pieces because it's ridiculous. It's all ridiculous. Just one more clip from the guy, from Ryan Walters here. He was at a meeting or I'm not even sure what this was. Some kind of a public meeting with parents or something. And he announced before this meeting happened that he intended to remove race as a factor from the Tulsa race massacre. Okay, back in the early 1900s, I think. When was this? Yeah, May 31st, 1921. There were segregated towns. Black people lived in black-only areas. There's like redlining and all kinds of things like that. And there was an area, like they had a completely separate economy, effectively, because they weren't allowed to operate in the white economy. They weren't allowed to, be lawyers or doctors or any of that stuff. So they had to work together and build up, some meager, modest living, if you will, because they had no other choice, right? Well, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, there was this area where they had set up their own banks and their own whatever, and it was called Black Wall Street. And white people who lived right over the fence didn't like the fact that there were black people who were even semi-successful. So they went into Tulsa and burned down Black Wall Street, killed tons of people. How many people died in this? It's called the Tulsa Race Massacre. Total dead and displaced unknown. 36 total, 26 black and 10 white dead, according to 1921 records. 150 to 200 black and 50 white dead from a 1921 estimate by W.F. White. 39 confirmed dead, 26 black stillborn, and 13 white. Yeah, I'm not even sure. I'm not sure exactly how many, but I think maybe 150 dead, plus countless injured, 800 plus injured. 183 serious injuries, as far as I can tell. Exact number unknown. You know why? Because no one gave a shit because they were black. The Tulsa Race Massacre was a dark day in American history, and it was inspired entirely by anti-black racism. The white people across the fence didn't want anybody to be more successful than them. And Superintendent Ryan Walters here says he wants to remove race, the involvement of race in any way, from the Tulsa Race Massacre. He wants to take the word race out of it completely and just teach about an event that took place unconnected from race entirely. I love how the dude wants to teach about Martin Luther King Jr. and the origins of his beliefs and why he believes all that stuff and everything, and the Bible verses he pulled it from. Like, he wants to really get to the root of this stuff with Martin Luther King Jr. But when it comes to the Tulsa Race Massacre, he doesn't want anybody to know anything about like how the black community was hurt by the white community at the time. He doesn't want race involved at all. And after making that decision, he held like a meeting, a school meeting or whatever, and parents complained about it to him. And this is his answer.
I would never tell a kid that because of your race, because of your color of your skin, or your gender, or anything like that, you are less of a person or are inherently racist.
Who said that? Did anybody say that? I didn't say that. No one ever said that you're inherently racist if you are white. No one ever said, I mean, everyone has bias, of course. You know, the black community has bias, the Asian community has bias, the white community has bias. Like, everyone has bias. That's not the same as racism. It leads to, like, systemic racism. Like, what is he even talking about here?
That doesn't mean you don't judge the actions of individuals. Oh, you can absolutely. Historically, you should. This was right. This was wrong. They did this for this reason. But to say it was inherent in the because of their skin is where I say that is.
Who said that? He's saying you can't say they did this because they're white. Okay. Well, he wants to remove race from the equation entirely. He just wants to say this group of people invaded this town and destroyed it. Like, how are you going to do that without pointing out, like, their motives here? I don't understand. The guy is so full of shit with everything that he says and does. It's just absurd. Tell me what you think about it in the comments. That's where we get Juneteenth, right? Is that where No. Juneteenth is from, I think Juneteenth is from when slaves were told that they are officially free in the South. You know, the sickest part about Juneteenth and about, like, freeing slaves and stuff? Do you know how the government went about freeing the slaves? I mean, of course, they banned slavery in the future, and that caused a big civil war, but the federal government freed the existing slaves by purchasing them from the slave owners. Yeah, slave owners received reparations, but the slaves didn't. That is some right there. Just, I don't even know what to do with that. Next up, Christian nationalist Joel Webbon went on Stu Peters' podcast, and they couldn't help but to repeat Nazi propaganda. That's a sentence I never thought I'd say. When it's convenient, these people are the biggest Christians on planet Earth. When it's inconvenient, like following Jesus' command to love your neighbor as yourself, it all goes right out the window. We'll be right back. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I'm selling my book, Understanding Jehovah's Witnesses, 400 pages, and my second book, 100 Questions for Jehovah's Witnesses, which is about 80 pages. And you can find them both there on the website. Audio form, ebook form, whatever. It's about my experiences within the religion and the history of the religion generally. Dude on the left is Stu Peters. He's a Nazi, like full-blown Hitler-loving Nazi. And I'll establish that in a second. Dude on the right is Joel Webbon, Christian nationalist extremist. They did a show together, and it was, schmoobligong? Is that the word? I don't even have a word for this. I stole that joke. Let's listen to how it went on there. It's just crazy. This clip, by the way, is from late June 2024.
And we should think about Israel. That doesn't mean we have to have a malice, but we should think about the modern state of Israel. Number one, that this is not the same as Old Covenant Israel in our Old Testament. It's not.
Okay, bear in mind that Stu Peters, the other guy, is a Nazi. And somehow they made their way in this conversation around to Israel. Also, just for the record, I support Palestine 100%, all the way. I want Palestinians to have a fighting chance to live, to be able to be who they are and not worry about being blown up every morning. It's disgusting it's disgusting what Israel is up to right now. But I also support Jewish people's right to live without being like slandered and attacked and hated by people like this, okay? There's a subset of the population that supports people's rights, Palestinians' rights. That's me. And then there's a subset of the right, like the right wing, that will support Israel to their dying breath no matter what. Doesn't matter what they're doing because of religious reasons. Because they think that there's some special quality about Israel, like they have to exist for Jesus to come back because they have to construct a third temple where Jesus will be, all that stuff. But if you go even further to the right, you find people who, well, I can't even say they support Palestine. It's people who just fucking hate Jews. Like I don't know how else to put it. And that's where we found ourselves with these two guys right here. We're on the hate Jews end of the spectrum now. Not support Palestine. Okay. Let's keep listening to these nutter butters of epic proportions.
Israel in our Old Testament. It's not. Number two, it is a legitimate nation state. I'm not saying the way that it was started was legitimate, but all things, whether right or wrong. So Joe Biden, I think he stole the election.
Well, you're simply wrong, good sir.
But there is a certain point where even if a king comes in wrongfully, there is a certain point where he's been there long enough. He is king. It is a legitimate kingdom, or it's a legitimate nation. So my point is saying that is Israel. I think that the founding was one of the biggest mistakes in history that just gave birth to unceasing wars, and it's never going to stop.
Okay, sure. I agree so far, I suppose, whatever.
But that said, it is a legitimate nation state. And so I think that Christians should view it not as this special carved out people, but the same way we view any other nation, China or Brazil. We should view it as these are people made in the image of God. They need to get saved. There's not any special divine land right for them. Mm-hmm. There's not
I agree.
Special promise of revival for them. We send missionaries just like we would anywhere else, with only one exception. Not that they're special, but there is one exception. There are certain cults and groups that are incredibly hostile towards Christ. But
okay,
in terms of major world religions, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, there is no major world religion with a more hostile view towards the person and work of Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord, than Talmudic Judaism.
Really? You think that Jews are disproportionately hateful toward Christians or Christianity? Okay, that's a claim, I suppose. Whatever. I find it fascinating that he's like even going down this road, because the only reason that he's going on about this right now, in my opinion, is because he's on Stu Peters' show. Well, absolutely wild, dude. So anyway, let me just give you a little bit of context for Stu Peters if you don't know. I'm going to make this quick if you've seen these before. This one is from May 24th, 2024. Stu Peters appeared on the Fresh and Fit podcast. They're like Andrew Tate stands, if you will.
Yesterday, Newsweek called me a pro-Hitler Nazi. Raw Story called me a pro-Hitler Nazi. I don't know.
100%.
All these people get. I mean, they said that I was a Holocaust denier, which is completely false.
Yep. No, it's completely real. He is.
False. Yep. Emphatically false. As a matter of fact, they made up a quote out of whole cloth and said, Stu Peters said, quote, Hitler is a hero. I have never said any such
whole cloth, huh? Okay.
Thing. And they can print this stuff with impunity because the hubris is so, because there's no accountability.
Accountability, by the way, what he means when he says accountability is, and I'm quoting him here, hang them from a thick rope until they are dead. His words, not mine. Okay, wow. So they just made this stuff up, huh? Boy, would it be embarrassing if I happened to have the exact clip that Raw Story was referencing.
Hitler may have been an evil dictator, a ruthless person that murdered millions of people. I don't know, because of the propaganda that surrounds every war. But for this, wasn't he a hero? Wasn't Hitler doing the right thing when he...
Whoopsie daisy, just picked a whole bouquet of oopsie daisies on that one, didn't he? Yeah. Probably don't say, I didn't do this thing, when you actually did do that thing in the future. Just free advice there for you, Stu.
Hitler doing the right thing when he ordered these books to be burned and these places to be stormed by force?
Well, even if he didn't order it, at least the people that followed him knew what to do, and he wasn't going to complain about it.
What a psychotic thing to say or think or believe or whatever. Anyway, now you have an idea of who we're working with, right? To really drive the point home for you, though, Stu Peters posted this to his Twitter account late June 2024, just doing a little light reading on my flight. And the book is Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. Okay, you know what? I've thought about reading Mein Kampf, not because I thought I could derive some, moral whatever from it, but because it's a piece of history that could serve some interesting purpose to teach me about the mindset of whatever, right? I haven't read it. I've since been told that Mein Kampf is really just ravings of a madman, and it doesn't really offer any context of value, or it doesn't add anything of value to you. So there's really no point in reading it. But I guess I can see a justification for reading Mein Kampf. That doesn't make him a Nazi, right? Maybe he's not a Nazi, even though he praised Hitler a minute ago. Except he posted this to his Twitter account too. Before Mein Kampf, he's wearing a hat sideways and has a hoodie on. After Mein Kampf, got his hands in his pockets, wearing a nice clean suit, standing in front of, a car? I don't know what this is. A plane, maybe? The implication, of course, is I was a loser before Mein Kampf, and now I'm a winner after reading it. Yeah, he's a Nazi. All right, now, let's just, listen to a little bit more of this Joel Webbon thing, where he went on Stu Peters thing, because it is just wild. And by the way, I cover these whole full-length videos where Webbon goes on Stu Peters. I cover this kind of thing every Wednesday and Thursday morning, 10:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. on my Owen Morgan Unfiltered YouTube channel. If you missed it, then just check it. And I may have uploaded a cleaned-up, edited-down version of it if you want to see the edited version. Anyway, listen to this clip from Webbon.
Adopt a distinctly Christian preamble, and then all the 10 commandments must be legislated.
He's laying down how you create a Christian state, I guess. Wow.
What we've done is we thought the second table of the law, so second table meaning commandments 5 through 10, the commandments of God that pertain to our horizontal relationship with our neighbor, like don't steal, don't murder, these kinds of things. We think that should be legislated by
horizontal relationship. I never heard that before. Okay.
We think that should be legislated by the civil magistrate, but the first table of the law, not that. But that's not true. And I'm not just talking about Old Covenant Israel in the Old Testament. You look at King Alfred, you look at Constantine, you look at Richard the Lionheart, you look at Duke Godfrey, who chopped a Turk in half diagonally with one swing of the sword.
And that's impressive and good in his mind? Okay, keep that in the back of your head for a second, what he said about cutting somebody in half with a sword, okay? Remember that. We'll come back to it in a second.
With one swing of the sword. These guys, they legislated both tables of the law. That's where all the prosperity comes from, because you can't hang in midair these second table commandments of don't steal from your neighbor apart from have no other gods before me. Idolatry is the fountainhead of the stream. You cannot have an idolatrous people and yet somehow have a moral people.
Wow, I guess that just shoots capitalism to shit, doesn't it? I guess we can't be capitalist anymore. Isn't capitalism idolatry or envy? Isn't that the whole basis of the moral system, or of the political system, of the economic system? How do you have capitalism without envy or idolatry? What? What kind of economic system does he want? Is this for real? Okay, now, you remember what he said a minute ago about cutting a dude in half with the sword? I got to think, that's a super weird thing for him to bring up, right? Why did he say that? Does he think that's impressive? Is that good? What? What's going through his head when he thinks about people being cut in half with a sword? And it hit me. This video right here, this clip explains it.
If we had a Christian nation and women could vote, then within 50 years, we would no longer have a Christian nation.
Just take away women's right to vote, okay?
That God has not designed women for warfare. And that's part of what politics is. It's really all that politics is.
No, it's not. Warfare is killing people. Politics is not killing people.
It's war without the blood. And I believe that the sword has been given to men. The sword is, without being crude, I think this is a fact. It is a phallus. It is assigned by God to men. I think.
Oh boy. We have entered La La Land officially. So what was that about cutting a guy in half with his sword, quote unquote? Like, I'm just trying to like draw connections to try to figure out this guy's like overarching worldview here. So he thinks that swords should only belong to men because it's basically like you're taking your twig and berries and poking them into people. Is that what it is? What? Oh my God, dude.
By God to men. I think nature shows that. I think scripture shows that. So both natural revelation and special revelation.
Oh my God. Like, what the hell? Natural revelation scripture shows that swords are like a twig and berries?
Shows that. I think scripture shows that. So
how does scripture show that? What? Oh my God. Get help. Okay, now if you don't know Joel Webbon, I'm just going to like, I've played this clip before, just give you a little foundation for who he is. This is his explanation for how he sees a Christian nation in an ideal world.
God appoints some kind of ruler who is unapologetically Christian, and he comes...
Oh, is like all of our leaders haven't already been like unapologetically Christian? Has there ever been a single president who has not openly said, I am a Christian, aside from like, you know, Thomas Jefferson or some of the early people?
Christian, and he comes in with a sword and says, I'm sorry, but lawlessness and wickedness will not be tolerated anymore. And he doesn't force conversions, just for the record, because that's another one of the objections that's just ill-founded.
I do have an objection to Christian nationalism. Yeah, I do worry that he's going to force conversion.
He doesn't go around forcing conversions, but instead what he does is he forces external morality.
Oh, so he does force people to be Christian, basically, right?
He doesn't force a change of heart. Only the gospel can do that.
Didn't say he was going to try to force a change of heart.
But what a king can do is he can say, whether you're regenerate or not, you're going to pretend.
Yeah, that's called forcing conversion. Are you serious? You know what?
Now you're an asshole. You got that? You're an asshole, is what you are. No, he's an asshole.
And you know what? I think this one applies to him too.
I'm dumber than a box of rocks in a lot of areas.
This guy has to know. He's completely full of it, right? He must. How could he not?
You're at least going to pretend to be Christian. They're not free thinkers. They're not courageous. They're not intelligent. They're men, and men must be governed. And if they must be governed, then our prayer as Christians is that they would be governed in the right direction, at least, for the good of the church.
What a weird thing to say. Men must be governed. What does that mean? Yeah, a government should exist in society. Like, I don't understand the point of him saying men must be governed. It's just such a weird, creepy, odd thing to say, right? Anyway, let's go back to, now that you have an idea of who Stu Peters and who Joel Webbon are, let's go back to this clip where they were talking to each other, okay? Check this one out. Again, this is June 27th, 2024.
Pastor Joel Webbon, amazing conversation before we go, and I'm going to run over time, but I don't care. Will you take us out in prayer?
He's a rebel. He's a rebel like that. He's willing to go over time. Doesn't matter what the consequences are.
Yes, sir. Father, we thank you for Jesus Christ, that he's the root, this olive tree.
Look at this dude's ears. What is up with his ears? You seeing this? Why are they so cherry red here? He's been thinking about cutting people in half with his sword? Is that why his ears are so cherry red? Weird. Okay.
For Jesus Christ, that he's the root, this olive tree that has union with the root, and that's where all the life and the flourishing and the fruit comes from. That root was not Abraham, not in the truest sense. It wasn't King David. It wasn't the old covenant. And
yes, it was. Those are the people who are like purported to be the roots of Christianity, of Judaism, of whatever. Christianity believes that those are the roots of the religions. What are you talking about?
It wasn't King David. It wasn't the old covenant and the nation of Israel, but the root, not seeds, plural, but singular, the seed of Abraham, that root was Christ.
What the hell does that mean? It's like I'm sitting here trying to pull it apart and like derive some meaning from it. It's just nonsense. This is like Jordan Peterson level nonsense, isn't it? He's just like saying words and sticking them next to each other, and people try to like derive meaning from it. It's just garbage.
That root was Christ. And the only way to have union with him is by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. And that is available to all peoples in all times.
Yeah, but faith without works is dead, right? How do you get around that scripture? I mean, I'm not arguing for that. I'm just saying, why is he ignoring one verse in the Bible in favor of another? It's weird.
In all times, in all places. And Lord, we pray that people would put their faith in Jesus, that they would trust that he is enough, that we are Israel in the truest, eternal, ultimate sense, that we are not, Christians are not stepchildren sitting at the far end of the table, hoping for some attention and affection from dad.
Is that how you view your stepchildren? This is giving me like a weird, disturbing peer into this guy's life or into his mindset. Like, what? What the hell is he going on about right now?
Hoping for some attention and affection from dad, but we are beloved.
Was this his experience? Like, was he the stepkid in this scenario? I'm trying to figure this out. Like, I really want to know. Why did he bring up stepkids like this?
But we are beloved, adopted children, and that this goes for all nations, including the modern state of Israel. It's not the Old Testament nation state, but it is still a people created in the image of God. This promise is for them as well.
Dude, I that probably pisses Stu Peters off, honestly, right there. Like, he doesn't want Jews to have any legitimacy at all.
If it comes with a condition, they repent of their sins and trust in Jesus. And Lord, we pray that that would be the case. I pray that Israel would repent of their sins, of certain war crimes, of perversion, of influencing with transgenderism and
perversion and influencing with transgender. Like, what? What's he talking about? Israel has influence with transgender? Like, what? Like, I'm grasping at straws right now, trying to understand what the hell's going on in his head.
Transgenderism and sodomy and these kinds of things.
Oh boy, not sodomy. You catch that one?
Of influencing with transgenderism and sodomy and these kinds of things. I know it's not everyone in Israel, but there are some key leaders, many that have done this in multiple cultures.
Sodomy? They've done sodomy? Is that what we're talking about? You know what's funny about this? I'm sorry, I'm just going to take a quick aside here. Sodomy in the Bible is in reference to the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Except the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah were not being gay. It was ill treatment of the poor. Ezekiel 16:49. Now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. How about that? The Bible refers to quote-unquote sodomy as being like an evil in multiple places after that, and some Bible translations since then have translated sodomy as homosexuality incorrectly. And if the Bible doesn't, if the translation that Joel Webbon, for example, uses talks about just straight up sodomy rather than like being gay, he translates that in his head. And so do all of his parishioners or whatever, his churchgoers. Sodomy, when mentioned in the Bible, is not talking about being gay at all. Ever. But that's neither here nor there. Okay, go on. Tell me about how Jews commit sodomy more. And by the way, sodomy in a legal sense in the United States means doing anything with somebody that is not intended to produce a baby specifically. It's not just, one specific form of doing stuff. And that's what sodomy laws mean when they ban it.
Genderism and sodomy and these kinds of things. I know it's not everyone in Israel, but there are some key leaders, many that have done this in multiple cultures.
Who? And weren't we just talking about Israel? Why is he bringing up multiple cultures?
And Lord, we pray for the sake of our children and their protection that there would be repentance all the way around for Americans, for Jews, for Brazilians, all the way around, that we would.
Why Brazilians? Did they do something wrong?
That we would trust in Jesus and be rooted in him. He's the fountainhead from which all blessings come from, not some nation on the other side of the world. Help us to believe this and be blessed by it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Dude, look at the Chiron at the bottom. God's law is moral and very good. I feel like if you have to repeat this as a mantra, then maybe it's not so good. why are you so dead set on convincing people of this? Like, it seems like it'd be able to stand on its own if it were true, right? Anyway, that was Joel Webbon on Stu Peters' show or whatever. Well, I don't know if Joel Webbon's a Nazi, but Stu Peters is definitely a Nazi. Joel Webbon, I'm sure, has some underlying anti-Semitic views, but boy, you cannot beat the extremist anti-Semitism of Stu Peters. That's hard to do. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments. And again, follow me over to Owen Morgan Unfiltered if you want to see like this whole thing. What a name, though, right? Peters, Stu Peters. You know, I was thinking about this, and I think the perfect name for a gay dude is Peter Parker. Is that not like absolutely on point? It's just a fantastic name for a gay dude. Next up, Janet Porter is a Christian nationalist. She's probably most famous for writing the abortion bounty law in Texas. Remember that? Texas passed a bill that said people could sue others who had an abortion or took part in the process anywhere along the way. If the jury decides they really did have an abortion, they win $10,000. She has a new idea for a lawsuit. She basically copy and pasted that bill, but this time she targeted teachers, librarians, or school administration. If anybody even mentions anything that could be interpreted as related to being gay at all, they can be sued. We'll be right back. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I'm selling my book, Understanding Jehovah's Witnesses, 400 pages, and my second book, 100 Questions for Jehovah's Witnesses, which is about 80 pages. And you can find them both there on the website. Audio form, ebook form, whatever. It's about my experiences within the religion and the history of the religion generally. This is Janet Porter. You may not have heard of her because she's a lawyer that largely operates in the background, but she's like a right-wing extremist, and it is absolutely insane, some of the things that she says and does and believes. She's actually responsible for the Texas bounty law that went into effect. I don't know if you guys remember this, but what was it, like a year or two ago? I don't remember when. Texas passed a law that said if you get an abortion and somebody knows about it, then that person can sue you and anybody along the way that participated. The Uber driver that took you to the place, the clinic's nurses, and the person that types your info into the computer, and the doctor, and the everybody all along the way can be sued for $10,000 each, and you will get $10,000 for suing them, basically. It was an attempt to ban abortion before it was legal to ban abortion. That she was responsible for that bill. She wrote it. And now she works for an organization called the National Association of Christian Lawmakers. Works with a guy named Jason Rapert, R-A-P-E-R-T. Wild name, I know. Don't get me started. And she's doing something new now against the LGBT community. She's creating effectively the same bounty bill that she wrote before, except for the LGBT community. So let's talk about it. Let me just give you a little introduction to who she is. Janet Porter. This clip is from late April 2021. This is about the Equality Act. She finds a way to demonize the Equality Act. I'll just put it that way.
The third point is it'll repeal the pro-life laws, then it will endanger women. Imagine if you're a woman who's been abused by her husband, who finds herself, she goes to a shelter, all right? Guess what? This shelter is not going to be able to refuse any man as long as they say, I'm a woman, I identify as a woman.
Okay, just real quick, I'm sorry. That's simply ridiculous. You know, my mom went to a number of different battered women's shelters, and there were men there who were abused by their spouse. And my mom told me this when I was little, like really little. She was telling me about this. You know, she met a guy at this shelter, and she's like, a guy? He said, yeah, men can be abused too. She's like, yeah, I guess so. Never thought about it. Men have always existed in these shelters. Abuse is not exclusive to women. That being said, there are some cases where women have PTSD from men, you know, from being around men. That needs to be worked out by a therapist, like pretty quickly. But I can see a case where they would reasonably be separated from general population until that's resolved. Aside from all of that, nobody can just say, I'm a woman, and then go do whatever they want. That is not how it's worked ever. That's not how it works now. That's not how it would work under the Equality Act. The process of transitioning is long and arduous and difficult and not fun for anybody. even social transitioning, like set aside hormones, set aside surgeries or anything at all, just socially transitioning, going by a new name and presenting as a different gender is hard. It's not a fun process. And have you ever noticed how Janet Porter and people like her never name specific people who have taken advantage of a kid in a bathroom while pretending to be trans, like got into the bathroom under the pretense that they are trans and then took advantage of kids there? Ever notice how she never throws out names, ever? She never throws out names of people who went to a battered women's shelter pretending to be a woman so that they could gain access to the shelter. It's because it never happens. It's never been a problem, and even if it existed, it wouldn't be a problem. That's the point. Battered women's shelters are free to and should be allowed to reject anybody for any reason, because abusers have a tendency to use dirty tricks to manipulate people and weasel their way into these shelters and whatever else. Battered women's shelters should be allowed to do whatever it takes to keep their people safe, men or women or whatever. It's always been like that.
Costume change. Any man can invade a shelter, can invade your shower room, your locker room.
This is just complete bullshit. You going to give me an example of this?
Your bathroom, can come into any previously safe space. It is what some are calling political of women.
Holy shit. Really? It's political? Wow. Okay, that's taking a little far, I think. I mean, that's taking it really far. That's absolutely absurd, and it's disgusting. And you know what it's doing, really? It's cheapening the term. It's downplaying it and turning it into like a joke when it's not a joke. What is wrong with her that she would say something like this? This is shameless, sadistic BS.
Because it's putting them in such harm's way. If you are a serial rapist and you'd like to go to the woman's prison instead of the man's prison, again, say you're a woman, and
not how it works.
There you are. And all of these women who are incarcerated are also put in harm's way. Shelters also in harm's way.
Just complete nonsense. Not how it works. Not how it's ever worked. She's going to lie and fearmonger and propagandize. Now you have an idea of who she is. Her justification for being against the Equality Act, like who could be against the Equality Act? It's going to lead to women being politically, really. Anyway, like I said, she created a new bill that's designed to target members of the LGBT community and anybody who talks about it to any degree ever. Listen to her breakdown here of her new bill. This one, by the way, is from late June 2024. That one was late April 2021. This is late June 2024.
I don't want to oversell this, but I believe this could be the next heartbeat bill.
That's the Bounty one from Texas. The Bounty bill about abortions, that was wrapped up in the heartbeat bill. And she had a part in writing the heartbeat bills, like the first heartbeat bill and everything. I believe she wrote them originally.
And it started with the library bill, and we've been trying for a couple of years. I worked with Senator Rapert 2 years ago. We tried to get it in a special session in Arkansas. The clock ran out.
Rapert was a senator in Arkansas, I believe, until he was voted out a year ago, maybe. And that's when he really started hammering down on this. NACL, National Association of Christian Lawmakers, I believe. She's a board member of it. A founding member, I think, and he's a co-founding member, and he's got an absolutely wild last name. What was it like growing up with a last name like that? God.
I tried to get it going in the state of West Virginia. It didn't quite happen. But we met with Jonathan Mitchell just recently and with Representative Bentley. And essentially what this would do is just as Mary said, it's the heartbeat bill protects them in the womb, protects children in the womb. This child protect.
No, it doesn't actually. It doesn't protect children in the womb. But okay.
protects children in the womb, this child protection bill will protect them in the classroom. So when I first met with Jonathan Mitchell, he's the guy that came up with the civil penalty saying, hey, citizens can sue if they don't follow the Texas heartbeat law. And I'll just going to be very transparent.
That's a bounty bill.
And I'll just going to be very transparent with you. When I first heard this, I thought, man, I really like the criminal penalty. I like the idea of making abortionists felons because then they lose their medical license. But I said, all right, we're going to try it. There you are, Senator. God bless you. And so we tried the Texas heartbeat bill, and it worked. And I was suspicious even after it was enacted. I had people call. We called around to the abortion mills in Texas, and what do you know? When there was a threat of a lawsuit, when it might cost them $10,000 personally, they stopped killing children.
Absolutely disgusting. That's not what abortion is doing, by the way. I really liked where Roe v. Wade was. You know, I've gone down this road, but I'm just going to say this one more time. At some point between day 1 and week 39 and day 6, it becomes a person, right? Somewhere in that spectrum, it becomes a person. Doctors have drawn a bright line for where it becomes a person effectively. When it turns into something more than just a grouping of cells, when it's actually visible to the human eye and no longer invisible to the human eye, it deserves like more moral consideration at the very least. People deal with bright line rules a lot in law. Like, some states allow you to drive and get a license at like 18. Some allow it at 16, but none of them allow it at 10. That's a bright line rule. When is it appropriate for somebody to get a driver's license? It's arbitrary. You know, you could stick the pin anywhere along there, like anywhere in the spectrum. But we have to draw it somewhere so everybody agrees where we're going to draw it. It's about 18, 16 to 18. In the same way, we have to put the pin somewhere in where is it okay to get an abortion and not to get an abortion. In my opinion, no moral weight needs to be afforded before 10 weeks. 10 to 15 weeks, you still don't really need to afford much moral weight to it, but it should be a more serious decision at that point. Shouldn't be banned, of course. You should be allowed to make that decision if you want. 15 to 20 weeks, it should be a lot more serious. Like, you should have a conversation, maybe with a counselor even. 20 weeks to 30 weeks, a doctor has to approve this for a medical reason, like the mom is dying, or hydroencephaly, where the head is literally just like filled with water. There's nothing in there but water. Something like that. And then 30 weeks and onward, it does not happen. The only exception is if like the mom's going to die or the baby's going to die or both. That's my bright line. And that's pretty much where Roe v. Wade was. Before 20 weeks, you can make the decision. After 20 weeks, a doctor has to make that decision, basically. I'm all in favor of that. But this woman wants to eliminate it entirely. She thinks from the moment you finish, when you're laying there smoking a cigarette, there's a third person in the room with you. Before you stand up to use the bathroom, there's a third person in the room. That's nonsense. That isn't how, like, reality works. And they've even taken it a step back. I say they. When I say they, I'm talking about Janet Porter and other right-wing extremists. They've taken it a step back and said, not only is it murder when you, like, end a pregnancy that's, like, 3 days old or, like, a week old or something. Literally 150 cells. Invisible to the human eye. Not only is it murder then, but it's even murder if you prevent pregnancy in the first place through like plan B. That's not terminating a pregnancy. If you're pregnant, that's it. Plan B doesn't work. It only works if the egg is not like attached to the uterine wall. They don't want that either. They think plan B is murder. Now that, I mean, I've heard Janet Porter and others, I have a billion examples. Joel Webbon, I don't want to use weasel words here. Jackie Eubanks, a Trump-endorsed candidate for office. I've heard them say that contraception, like birth control, is murder. Like, you're literally just preventing pregnancy. Like, are they going to say, like, this is murder next? Like, I'm just scratching my nose right now. That's murder because I'm killing cells? I literally just killed more cells than an abortion does at certain stages. And these people are obsessed with stopping abortion to any degree. And they're like using this ridiculous religious foundation to it, like God hates abortion. No, he doesn't. Numbers 5:11-23 specifically instructs people to get abortions if, for example, they think that their wife has cheated on them. Get an abortion. The Bible is in favor of abortions. This whole thing is a political charade meant to get people whipped into a blood frenzy so that they can get support for their side. When you believe that you are saving somebody's life by doing this thing or that thing or whatever, by writing this legislation, by voting for this bill, you can justify literally anything. If you see somebody hanging from a cliff, holding on to like a vine about to fall, what would you not be justified in doing to save their life? As long as you're not taking the life of another, of course, you're justified in doing anything to save their lives, right? That's where these people's heads have gone. To a dark extremist recess. And it's not even, for me, it's not even like the beliefs that I have a problem with. I do, of course, but it's not that so much as the tactics. They have justified literally anything. Ends justify the means mentality. Whatever end I'm trying to reach is justifies the tactics I use to get to that end. That mindset leads to absolute psychosis. Sometimes the end does not justify the means that you use to get to the end. Sometimes the thing that you do is worse than the thing you're trying to prevent. More evil. Saving one life is not justified if you have to kill 5 others to save it, for example. That's the tactic, the belief that these people seem to be holding in their head right now. Anyway, so this anti-abortion extremist has come up with a brand new law to hurt the LGBT community.
When it might cost them $10,000 personally, they stopped killing children. And
Okay, that's not happening.
so, what if,
People clapping for this propagandistic garbage.
instead of us putting out all these fires in this library and in this school and in this county, what if we stopped it at the source? What if we put together a bill that says, hey, guess what? If you're involved in any kind of grooming, by the way, what's happening in the schools right now?
Well, now hang on a second. Any kind of grooming, she says? What is grooming in her mind? I'll tell you what it is. In her mind, grooming is being gay. Just being gay. Having a husband when you're a dude. Having a picture of you next to another man. Owning 3 pairs of women's underwear as a man. That used to be illegal in the United States not so long ago. Because being trans was illegal, of course. In her head, simply being gay or being trans or whatever is grooming.
Happening in the schools right now, teachers are giving in this agenda, they're giving kids assignments, role play. We'd like you to pretend like you're attracted to the same gender.
Did you notice she didn't actually give us an example? Why didn't she say, I don't know, Midland Elementary School in District 7 of whatever, Michigan or whatever, has a teacher named blah, blah, blah who gave this assignment to the kids. You notice she didn't do that? She didn't cite any examples. She's using weasel words. She's not giving us sources to any of this. She's just making this up. This is a fictitious scenario.
They're giving kids assignments, role play. We'd like you to pretend like you're attracted to the same gender. Oh, now we're going to give you extra credit if you go to the Pride Parade. Oh, hey, how about this? We're going to put a reading list together so mom and dad won't see it as a school book, but your suggested reading is pornography for your teenager.
Where did this happen? Specifically, what books were assigned as summer reading that were graphic? Which ones? She have a name? She have a school district, a teacher, and anything at all? No, because she made it up. She's looking for some way to demonize the LGBT community and push them back into the closet by any means necessary. She's got her end that she wants to reach, force LGBT people out of society or into the closet. And the means she uses to get there is justified by the end, no matter what.
And by the way, one of the other things this bill does, and Jonathan made it clear in the library setting, it's also in the classroom setting, that if you don't tell mom and dad what Johnny and Susie are reading, then you're liable to the lawsuit. All right, it's not as catchy as if a heartbeat's detected.
If you don't tell the parents what the kids are reading, then you can be sued. I don't understand, like, I don't. This just sounds like confusing as hell. Like, can't this be used against people like rampantly, like crazy? And it's just making teachers' jobs like that much harder. They already have a hard job.
All right, it's not as catchy as if a heartbeat's detected, the baby's protected. But here's what we have. We're working on our marketing, but here's what I've got so far. If there's grooming, a lawsuit is looming. That's where we are right now. And
again, when she says grooming, she means simply being gay.
And by the way, this addresses the drag queen story hour.
Yeah, she used a slur there. I had to cut it out.
Story hour. It's the outside speaker that they bring in from GLAAD or from Planned Parenthood or from.
Do schools do that? Bring in outside speakers from GLAAD? That's like the gay rights nonprofit, I think. I don't remember what the acronym is now. I love it how she's like complaining about outside speakers coming in from nonprofits, which, by the way, those aren't mandated. You can attend that or not. Usually they bring them in during lunchtime and you can go to these events if you want, or they're after school, bring them in for after school clubs or something. She's complaining about that, but doesn't complain when kids are mandated to attend Christian revivals at school. This happened in Huntington, West Virginia. In fact, it happened all over the West Virginia area by Nick Walker. That's his name. Nick Walker Ministries, holding revivals in school, and teachers mandated the students attend. Not only that kind of thing happens all the time. Is she complaining about that at all? If she thinks that this is grooming, oh boy, wait until you hear what evangelical ministries are doing in classrooms. She doesn't care about that. She never brings that up. It's not included in any subsection of her bill or anything at all. She wants that. She's not opposed to grooming, quote unquote. She's opposed to gay people.
Planned Parenthood or from whatever the name they pick for the latest homosexual activist group. It is the way, in my opinion, and I came out of, we talked about what is birthed out of prayer. I had been praying for years. How do we address the alphabet mafia? The LGBT, QRSTD.
Wow, that's an original joke. Ha ha ha.
How do we go after that and get it out of our schools? Get this. If we can't put the 10 Commandments in front of the classroom, why are we letting this agenda in?
There's no agenda, okay? People are just gay, and that's how it is. Jesus Christ, dude. And also, 10 Commandments in classrooms, that's like a religious symbol. And there's explicitly, like in the Constitution, it explicitly says you shouldn't have any like religion mixed in with state. The Founding Fathers intentionally, specifically put that in the Constitution and explained what they meant when they said it. They didn't say you can't be gay. And even if they did, they would have been wrong.
This agenda in. And so we can actually take out the grooming. We take out the sodomy. It's all listed in this bill. Now, your state may not want to go that far. All right. By the way, I have a whole bunch of input that's come in since we met yesterday, Mary. Let
me tell you, no state wants to go that far, actually. Like in reality, the people in every single state, I would bet, don't want to go that far, banning people from being gay or banning people from having a picture of their spouse on their desk or whatever. Nobody wants to go that far. But the evangelical voting bloc, which is like what Janet Porter's a part of, is about 15% of the country, but they're so organized. They're like pulled together and work together like nobody's business. Lobby people, they have tons of money to blow. I don't know how they have so much money. My God, dude. 15% of the country is pulling strings and affecting the lives of the other 85%, adversely, negatively affecting their lives. And you know why? It's because these people will crawl over broken glass to vote for whoever they want. And the other 85% is lackadaisical or doesn't see it as that important or thinks that their vote doesn't count or whatever other thing. We've got to be willing to crawl over broken glass to vote, whatever it takes, just like these people.
From Richard Harris, from Andrew Womack, from Andy Schlafly, whose mom is Phyllis Schlafly. We have...
These are all extremists she's listing.
Schlafly.
I've covered most of them.
We have Walter Weber from the ACLJ. They've all given input to tweak this and make it even better. But essentially, we've got a bill that says if Johnny or Susie comes home with any material that violates this long list of anything from pet to grooming to the LGBT agenda, then...
From grooming to the LGBT agenda. So if your kid comes home and says anything connected to LGBT whatever at all, then you can be sued for $10,000. And so can the principal and the teacher and the janitor and the everybody. Anyone, anywhere along the line, even the bus driver, they can all be sued for $10,000. That's the idea here.
Guess what? They are opening themselves up to a lawsuit. And just like with the Texas heartbeat bill, and Senator Hughes, I got to tell you, when I had
She's just mad. She looks like Dog the Bounty Hunter, says Sinvia's partner. That's funny. Okay. I don't know. I think she'd take that as an honor. Dog the Bounty Hunter. He's like a super right-wing nutcase now, right?
I had read the Texas heartbeat bill. I'm getting ready to testify for it. And I was actually laughing in my room out loud because it said that we can sue them and we can get the legal, and if they sue us, they can't get legal fees. But if we sue them, we can get legal fees. And I'm laughing. I'm like, can we even do this? Well, we can. That bill's upheld.
The law operates off of a principle where everybody is treated the same and everyone's treated fairly. So if you ban one religion, then all religions are banned. You know, if you say no religious documents in a classroom, that covers not only the Bible, but also the Torah, the Pentateuch, the Bhagavad Gita and the Quran and all of it, everything. That's how law has always worked. And she's throwing it out and saying, why do I care about that? No, I'm going to write biased bills that favor one group over another, and we're going to push it through, and the Supreme Court's going to approve it. Simple as that. We're not going to say we're going to allow religious people to act as like chaplains in schools. We're going to say Christians can act as chaplains in schools. That way they can exclude people they don't like. That is insane.
Laughing, I'm like, can we even do this? Well, we can. That bill's upheld.
Morally, logically, and legally, she can't, but she's going to anyway.
The court did not strike it down, and that same kind of language is in here, so that we're not opening up parents to legal fees. So it's just a bill that said.
So she's just put like all of the negative effects on school districts. She's just gonna like drain school districts of like every penny that they have. She's gonna make public education worse. She's going to make sure that teachers have less money than they already have. Like they're already buying crayons for their students. They don't need you suing them for $10,000 every time you think that they said something that might be gay. Jesus, dude.
It's just a bill that says, again, if you do this, then you will be held accountable, whether you are a teacher, whether you are a librarian, or whether you are an advisor to the gay club on school, whether you are someone who brings in an outside speaker or the outside speaker. We are going to be able to say, if there is grooming, a lawsuit is looming.
Just a colossal scumbag, this woman is. And she's had just an insane effect on the back end, like in the background. She's been operating for years. Unfortunately, like I wish I could have gone into more, but sadly I do have to stop here because this video is already getting too long. But tell me what you think about it in the comments. Like, what is this woman's deal, and why is she so obsessed with the LGBT, quote unquote? And is she really upset that she just looks like Dog the Bounty Hunter, or is she upset she doesn't look enough like Dog the Bounty Hunter? That's the real question. That's all I've got for you. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, don't forget to check me out on Patreon. And take a look at my YouTube channels. Owen Morgan, where I talk about religious issues. Telltale Fireside Chat, where I talk about politics. Telltale Unfiltered, where I do long-form breakdowns of stuff like this, and take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I'm selling my book, Understanding Jehovah's Witnesses, 400 pages, and my second book, 100 Questions for Jehovah's Witnesses, which is about 80 pages. And you can find them both there on the website. Audio form, ebook form, whatever. It's about my experiences within the religion and the history of the religion generally. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.